Hello, welcome to Sherba Mates. We are going to be doing a series, at least I'm planning on doing a series on Thursdays at noon, where we talk about changing our mind. And I'm pretty interested in this. So Max is going to be joining us a bit later, I think, to chit chat about it. But I've kind of got interested in this idea of changing your mind since we've been doing so much, flat earth stuff and so on and so forth. It just seems like there's got to be something going on that makes it so we can so heavily disagree on things. Like we disagree on, shape of the earth, or at least some people do, and we disagree on religion, wildly different on religion, like just extremely different all over the world. We all come to wild conclusions. The Hindus think what they're doing's working. The whatever, right? Like there's just a huge, uh, massive discrepancy on a belief. So wanted to kind of think about this idea of what it takes to change our mind. Um, am I trapped in the same problems on why I won't change my mind? So I've been reading this book, and I thought I would just take 5 or so minutes, maybe 10 minutes, to go over a chapter of this book. We would talk about it, and then we'll see how this goes. But over time, I wouldn't mind having a situation where I'm telling you guys my beliefs about things, and then we can have people on, and they're welcome to help try to change my mind about something. So it'll be kind of like we're arguing, I guess, but the point about it will be thinking about why we want to change our mind or why we don't want to change our mind. And so we can kind of have some discussion, arguments, hopefully get some audience participation in that. So some things that I think are true, we could discuss. So, one thing I don't probably want to do is I don't know if I want to argue just is Christianity true over and over. There's like so many channels that just argue about that, and so I don't know if I just want to have try to do one more channel where we argue about religion and whatnot. Maybe we could discuss that some, but I'm kind of worried that it might devolve into just that. But I'm willing to discuss about anything. So I love basketball. So if there's a basketball fan out there, I'm willing to tell you that zone is terrible and man is good. And LeBron's definitely one of the best two players of all time. Kareem's way better than he's number three, and it's not really close. Different things like that. So we can kind of discuss some different ideas on changing our mind, and we could maybe argue about some different subjects. So I'll be kind of watching the chat and seeing if there's some things that we want to discuss. Looks like we got someone who cares about the Pacers and Hoosiers, so I'm guessing that's in someone who is Indiana, or at least at some point became an Indiana fan for some reason. So it's not a sports show, it's not a religious show, it's not a political show, but we are going to be thinking about changing our mind. And so what we're going to do, just to kind of wet our whistles about this a little bit, and then we'll see if anybody um, wants to join. So I will go ahead and share the stream in the chat. So Max, if you want to help me out and put the link in the chat for people to be able to come in and join and maybe discuss later, um, we will kind of do that. So maybe there's something you want to convince me of. For those of you who've seen me before, maybe there's something you think that I'm wrong about and you'd like to jump in, or maybe you just want to ask me some questions and interrogate me and try to get me to change my mind about something. Like I said, it can be trivial, it can be not trivial. Um, so you're welcome to jump on board. But just to kind of talk about changing our mind a little bit, I have a screen share I think I'm going to do. We're going to go ahead and look at this book. So, How to Change Our Minds by David McRaney, and just have a few points about this. So this is a fairly recently written book, whatnot, and so we're going to be discussing it. And So the central puzzle: why do people change their minds or refuse to? So this is what his book's about. And this point number 2 is something I think is very, very easy, or a very, very apparent to see when we talk about things like flat Earth, right? So on this channel, we review debates all the time, you know, uh, all kinds of different subjects. Geez, I don't know if we did it on here, but is there Bigfoot? So on and so forth. And so number 2 here: facts and logic are rarely enough to persuade. I think that is so, so interesting. I think we all think that we have um, these facts that we are, getting on board, and because of these facts, we're changing our mind, and that is just so, so often not the case. The next, beliefs are tied to identity, emotion, and social belonging, and so when we think about changing people's minds, so often we're like, well, let's line up the facts and get all the facts going. And I actually think you would be better off changing someone's mind by just becoming their friend, getting them to like you, and then kind of coaxing them with your beliefs from there, right? Because they're going to want to believe your facts. They're going to want to believe your logic. And so, therefore, changing minds becomes about social belonging and identity. And then you're like, well, if you believe this, we can be even better friends. You can hang out with my friends. We can do fun things together. It'll be great. And so, I think this might be how changing our minds work. So we're going to kind of interrogate this. We're going to think about this. Is this guy right? Is it not? And he says, contrary to belief, people do change their minds. And that is true. Sometimes I think when we're doing flat earth stuff, we think people will never change their minds. They're stuck forever. But just think about your life. If you're older than like 12, you've believed one thing. And at some point, you changed your mind. And, you know, what was the cause? Why did you change your mind? What were the reasons? It usually isn't from debate or data overload. Though I will say I might disagree a little bit. I think sometimes we'll debate, we'll argue, we'll never change our view during the debate, but then the next time we talk about that subject, we might not talk about it the same way. You know what I mean? We'll like change our arguments based on the previous debate, even though we never actually admitted defeat at all. And so he argues that change happens gradually and unexpectedly, which may be true. I think that is often the way it is. We don't ever often admit that we've changed our mind till maybe a long time after we have. Illustrates world stories of radical belief changes. So he's going to be doing that in the book. He's going to have some examples of politics, social issues, personal transformation. So we'll be talking about some of those, and deeply held convictions that aren't fixed forever. Um, Arguing harder often makes people more defensive. I think this is absolutely true, right? Like Jaron being able to change his mind, I think is just incredibly interesting because he's fought so hard, and the harder he fought, the more I think he was buried deep into his argumentation. And so um, I think if you really want to change someone's mind, once again, you would want a positive relationship with them. If now on debates, often you're not trying to change the other person's mind, you're trying to affect everybody else. But even then, even if it's like a parasocial relationship, if how they feel about you while they watch you, are you funny? Maybe you can be really mean, but you're really super funny. But if you're just like mean, I don't know if that's going to be super convincing. That's why attempting to win debates can backfire. And listening and empathy are often more effective than confrontation. So listening, empathy, like, yeah, we're just gonna be their friend. So this guy's gonna, look at the science he claims. So we'll see how this author does on that. Um, gonna see how the brain, how it processes beliefs, the persuasion, so on and so forth. And this guy says he's a journalist, a curious learner, shares his journey, so on and so forth. And so we're going to look at some of his stories, some of the things he's gone through in his research, and that'll be our sort of jumping off point to talking about this. So we have our first caller. So we have Tell Me More. Max, you're kind of helping me today because I don't have my setup here. Tell Me More is on. I just want to discuss my strategy here. I basically feel like if I don't think the discussion's productive,
Yeah.
kick people off anytime I want, as soon as I want. I have no rules other than I am the
Yeah.
God King around here on this. So if I treat you unfairly, I'm sorry, but that's how it goes. So tell me more. Welcome on. Is there something you wanted to talk about regarding changing our minds?
Yeah, actually, I feel like I have like a really good perspective on this because like I did one of the really big changing my mind things. But if you prefer, like I can argue from either standpoint, like affirmative or the
Well,
opposition.
tell me about the subject, and then maybe
Uh,
we'll.
so yeah, I was as you guys probably could remember from before, I was once a independent fundamental Baptist, young earth creationist. Like I was die hard into the whole thing, sold out for God kind of thing. Like I did it all. Bible college, I was an evangelist, I preached apologetics, all that stuff, disciple of Kent Hovind. And then as I was doing all of that, it kept eroding my faith away because every time I would turn around, there would be more evidence against what I'm preaching. And I could never find the answers or get the answers from anybody who I saw as like more experienced or above me. Nobody could ever give me the answers to rebut this quote unquote science and fact. And eventually I came to see it as actual reality. And
Mm.
I changed my mind. I've gone from a position of faith to now trusting the evidence.
And so, are you an atheist now, or agnostic, or do you
Uh,
care? What do you?
I don't know. Like I dislike the stigma that a lot of people put on the atheist moniker. I've taken to calling myself an evidentialist, where I follow what the evidence says, and in that regard, yes, I would be an atheist. I do not believe that there is a God.
Okay.
In fact, I believe that there isn't a God, and I think that's an important distinction to make.
So, on your journey to get to that point, did you make friends who weren't Christians that you became friends with along the way? Like, tell me about the relationships in your life
Mm.
through this transition.
Well, okay, so probably the like number one relationship, of course, is my wife.
Hmm.
We met inside what I call it a cult because looking back, I think it is very occultic. The IFBs, I think they're very occultic. I met her inside the cult while at the Bible college, and we properly courted, as was the fad there,
Hmm.
and did the whole dating thing, and then got engaged, and then I think it was a year we waited while being engaged. It was super long engagement, in my opinion, and then got married. And it was just a couple years after getting married where it just all kind of started to fall apart for me, and I started kind of like get away from it. Um, we all stopped going to church. We all stopped praying, reading our Bibles, and doing all those, super Christian things. And she's still in a position of faith, in a position of belief, while I am not, and she accepts that, and she's fine with that. Uh, that would be the number one most important relationship,
Hmm.
and there's no turbulence there. I
Sure.
don't think that there's a problem there. um she doesn't like it, obviously, but she's not going to be like, oh, you can't be like that, or I'm not having this, I'm out, divorce, bye bye. She's fine with it. She's in love with me, not my beliefs.
Hmm. So,
um
but other relationship, did you meet some
yeah,
people that weren't Christians that
all
you
the time.
discuss things with it? Yeah. So tell me about that.
Yeah. So like when I was preaching, when I was doing apologetics, that would sometimes, like,
So when you
depending
say
on the
you're
church,
preaching, you're like a pastor, or you're just doing it?
I was an evangelist. I worked as a youth pastor out of a church,
Uh-huh.
and I would get offers to come and preach at different churches because they knew that I was seeking to be a full-time evangelist, which
Yeah.
I
Okay. Yep.
wasn't financially prepared for at the
So
time.
if people in the chat that don't know what that is there? It's not that uncommon anymore, or not as common anymore. But there'd be people who their whole job was they would like travel around the country or maybe the world, and all they would do is go from church to church to church to preach. So they might preach at conferences, maybe they're the speaker at a VBS, maybe they're a speaker at a church camp. There might be different types of things that they do, but they get paid. They might have people who financially support them that is like, oh, I think you being an evangelist is so great. We'll throw you $50 a month. We see you as some kind of missionary. But an evangelist basically just travels mostly full time. I mean, or a
like a
big percentage
stay-at-home
of the time.
missionary.
Yeah, yeah, and they travel and they preach. So you were saying you're a youth pastor, and then you were doing some evangelism. So that
Right.
okay makes sense.
And I did a lot of my evangelistic preaching from the point of apologetics, because at the time, like, I was being remotely mentored under Kent Hovind. I had correspondence with him, emails, and I'd call him and stuff. And I wasn't actually very far away from him, where he was at the time, after he got out of jail in Pensacola, and then he'd moved just up the road. I forget. Up in South Alabama, which was actually slightly closer to me. It was about an hour and 40-minute drive. So I could go and see him all the time. I could get lessons from him and talk to him all the time. And so that was like my motivation to be an apologetic preacher, because the things he would say, I would say. I would get slides from him, or I'd take notes from his slides, and I would use that as I preached.
Sure.
And it was basically, to me, the same as gospel truth, because it came from this guy who's been doing it forever. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me about the others. So I
Go ahead.
I accidentally derailed us with talking about what evangelist was. Tell me more about the non-Christian people then that you started meeting.
Right. So yeah, as I would go to these churches, and they would like advertise it as an apologetics preacher, or biblical, scientific, this or that. That would attract the attention of people who'd be like, "Oh, really?" And they might come and sit in the very back, and that was usually the people I would try and target. Is like, I would look for that casually dressed guy sitting in the back with his arms folded. I knew, okay, that's probably the guy sitting here thinking, what does this guy know?
And so then you would go talk to him, got to be friends with some of them. Is that how it happened?
I wouldn't say I got to be friends with a whole lot of them. I got real friendly with one guy. His name was Mike. And we still talk some, like, not a lot. We sometimes will play like online games together if we're on at the same time, but like we're not like best friends or anything. But he was in Panama City, Florida. And I was there. I forget the church I was at, but I was there and I was preaching and I was doing the apologetics and talking about the age of the earth and the flood and how we know this and that. And he came up afterward. He was like, flood didn't happen. And I talked about all the standard points. So, Mount Everest, there's clams up there, fossilized clams. How'd they get up there? The water had to be up there. Thought never would have crossed my mind that area of land was once under the water, like ground level or under sea level. But he would bring up the points like, this local floods, and he wasn't really like versed in it as much as I think we both would be now.
Yeah, so don't get too in the details here. Tell me about the relationship here.
He would talk to me about it, and I'd give him the counterpoints, and he was constantly like trying to like reach out to me at different times, because I told him, like, here's my email. Anytime you got a question or you want to talk about it, email me. And for like a month or so, he would email me like 2-3 times a week, being like, well, what about this? Or, well, what about that? And eventually I was like, hey, can I call you? And I'd call him. And after a while, we were texting all the time. And sometimes we wouldn't even talk about the apologetic stuff or the science stuff. I'd just be like, hey man, how you doing today? What's going on in your life? I want to pray for you. And things like that. And he would treat it friendly. He wouldn't be like, oh, you're gonna pray for me. What the hell is all that about? Anything like that. Right. He was friendly about it. And he wasn't, I wouldn't say like any particular like kind of nexus for me changing my mind or anything. It was fun for me to be able to talk to him. But as I like started coming out of it, I would ask him, "Hey, you said something one time about this. I don't have that email. What did you say?" And
Mhm.
he would, bring it back up, and I would go look for it or look for, as I did in those
Mhm.
times, I tried to look for how it was wrong
Right.
instead of trying to seek out how I was wrong.
Right. And so, friendly correspondence. He was
Yeah.
nice about everything,
Yeah.
and yeah. And so, just to maybe illustrate how something like happened to me. So, for example, like at some point, I would have been really against renewables and thought climate change was a hoax, and so on and so forth. And then, I got, I'd argue with my brother about it. So my brother and I
Mhm.
are really good friends. We would argue about it, and then I would look into it to show he was wrong, and so on and so forth, and argue and look into it. And the more I look into it, I've changed my mind about that. I think climate change is
Yeah.
super important and real, and think renewables are awesome, and it's like a huge interest of mine now. I own an electric car and think it's great, and so on and so forth. And but you say, well, it's because your brother gave you the facts. And it's like, well, yeah,
Mhm.
I guess I do agree. The facts were on his side, but it's not like I had never had access to any of those facts before. Why did I change my mind this time
Yeah.
and not another time? Because the facts were there. And in my opinion, on the climate stuff, they're kind of obvious in some way. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
it's not quite flat Earth, but we're not getting incredibly far away from flat Earth, right? I mean, the,
Yeah.
the scientists are pretty doggone sure as far as predicting the future goes, which of course is impossible. That they've done really, really good job. So anyway,
Yeah.
those facts were always there, and but I think the reason I was open and changed my mind this time was because of the relationship with my brother. We were
Mhm.
close, we were friends, and that allowed me to look at the facts, whereas I wouldn't have been willing to look at the facts
Mhm.
before. Is that obviously you weren't as good of friends with this guy as I am with
Yeah.
my brother necessarily, but what do you think the relationship aspect had effect had on your
Um,
situation?
if I'm gonna be like fair about it, I think that like at least having a couple of people who were on the opposite side of the argument from me, who would willingly and not be like, "Ha, told you so," or be like, "Oh, so you're starting to flip flop now, huh?" They weren't like trying to be a gotcha or anything like that. They would like, "Oh, here's what I said," or "Here's that information," and they wouldn't question it. They wouldn't like tease me about it or anything like that, or try and like press the issue. It's just like, oh yeah, here's that information, and I knew I could reach out to any of these handful of people and be like, hey, uh, you said this before. What was that information? And then I go and look it up, and I'd be like, huh, okay, so how does this line up with what I know to be true?
Hmm.
And the thing that I knew to be true was obviously not. And I would try and find in the science, like, okay, well, what does actually agree with it? Like, where does this actually come from this science?
Hmm.
Is it misunderstanding? Is the science trying to cover it up, like some kind of conspiracy? Is science actually telling the truth a little bit at a time and trying to cover it up? Or what am I missing,
Hmm.
basically? And I would, you know as I would get this information from them, I would be able to look it up and see where, okay, I'm missing the point.
Hmm.
It wasn't so much that uh I suddenly had this epiphany. I was just like, okay, so maybe I am wrong about that.
Hmm.
Or maybe science just hasn't caught up to this just yet, or something.
Hmm.
You try and reason in your head, how maybe you could still be right in some way. Um, but I think it helped a whole lot that I did have the ability to kind of like reach out to people who weren't going to try and railroad me with it.
Yeah, that you weren't going to go to war every time.
Yeah.
Comment here: wasn't Dr. J a basketball player? Dr. J was a basketball player. He was a really good basketball player in like the 70s. He played for the 76ers. He had a giant cool afro. He was a very exciting player. He and I's basketball games have very little in common, actually. He's bigger, stronger, faster, and better at most aspects of the game than I was. But once I got my PhD, because I love basketball so much, started going by that because I love basketball. Dr. J versus Larry Bird, great game. Yes, Larry Bird was a great player too. I'd say Larry Bird was better than Dr. J in my opinion. If anyone wants to come argue with me about it, well, I think you and I could talk lots more. I'll be on back Thursday, and I'm gonna jump you off now. John's been waiting in the queue, so I'm gonna chat with him for a little bit. So maybe we can talk more. It's fun. You know, your independent Baptist background. So I went to Faith Baptist Bible College, which would be a regular Baptist college and seminary. So technically not independent because it was associated with the Guard, but we were like really close to those independent Baptist circles. So I always you and I always have a lot of things in common. So that's fun.
Yeah. Not a problem, man. See you around.
Okay. Yep. Sounds good. All right. And then see if we can bring up John. John, how's it going?
Yeah, good guys. How you doing, Dr. J?
Doing well.
Cracking. Fantastic topic, by the way. This is bro. I love these type of conversations. They're excellent. So with your indulgence, I guess the first thing I'd like to do is an example of where I changed my mind. I'm not necessarily based on evidence because it was more a hypothesis, but it's something that because of the potential impact on other people, I thought it was a better way of operating. So, for example, I used to think that like when you got like women got catcalled at building sites when they're walking past, you know, like the stereotypical guy with the hard hat and the high vis shouting "show us your tits" from a scaffold. Mm-hmm. You know, I always used to think, well, that's a bit annoying, or at least it's sort of like at least you know might maybe possibly in certain circumstances find it flattering because they're sort of like telling you that they find you attractive.
Sure.
And I didn't really see it as that much of a big deal. Mm-hmm. Because there are a lot of women that were like, no, this is horrendous, this is borderline sexual abuse, etc. Mm-hmm. And I was listening to an evolutionary biologist, and the way she framed it was actually, if you think about it, based on our evolutionary biology, the catcall is not for the benefit of the woman that is being there. Sorry, one sec. Jack.
Someone's having a good time over there. Sounds like they're having.
Sorry, my son and daughter are having a sleepover, and they've just asked if they can let the chickens out of the pen so they can run around in the garden. You just like open the office door without even knocking. So,
sounds like a great idea.
But the way the evolutionary biologist presented it was, think about it this way: the catcall is not communication for the woman in question. The catcall is for all of the other men on the building site. And when you take that, like your hindbrain interprets that communication, the reason that the hairs stand up on the back of women's necks is because it's a lot of other men on the hunt that are in grape mode. And when that hindbrain kicks in, I was like, even if there is the smallest chance that that is actually the case, because of how it makes that woman feel, this has now for me become completely unacceptable behavior. And actually, my behavior did a complete 180. If I ever see it, to try and signify to that woman that there is somebody around who she can rely on and who is prepared to stand up for her, I now turn around and tell those guys to wind their neck in and shut the fuck up and leave her alone. Right. So I've gone from sort of being a bit of indifferent or not understanding what the big deal is. So it was kind of a low value.
Yeah. I was going to ask you how strong you.
I wasn't that invested in it. I was mostly sort of indifferent in it. But, And also, I'm not necessarily convinced that that's how all women interpret it. But if there's a possibility that that is how it is interpreted, so I'm sort of taking on board that I may have had low empathy for how the woman was feeling, and I was more sort of interpreting it how potentially a man would have interpreted it and didn't really give a shit. But actually, that completely changed my interpretation. And it's not something that I've experienced, but the other thing that is much more significant is this chap called Daryl Davies, who has literally changed the mind of dozens of clan members, which is what was referenced in some of the material that you showed earlier, by getting to be friends with them. And these are people, the clan members are people who've intentionally isolated themselves from another group.
Yeah.
So it was easy to make them the enemy or the boogeyman. And then this lovable, jovial, really friendly, impossible to hate guy turns up who happens to fall in that category and plays some epic jazz at them. And they're like, I can't hate this guy. I'm wrong. And it's just such a great way of
that seems It seems to be how homosexuality got accepted in
Yeah.
society, right? Like, was it because of the arguments? No, I think most people who aren't gay have a bit of an ick factor. It's like, yeah, I don't really I can't really imagine kissing John. Doesn't sound that great. So easy for me to say that, oh, that's icky, that's terrible. No one should do that, right? But then you meet, be friends with a few people that are gay or lesbian or whatever, and eventually go, why do I care about this so much? Like these people are nice. And so I think that was more to change. That did more to change people's minds on the homosexuality issue than almost anything.
Yeah, and there's also I think something I mentioned earlier in the comments was I think how easy it is to change somebody's mind. So, for example, if you have researched a topic and you then you research a topic and you come to a conclusion, and then at a later stage new evidence comes to light, but you're not aware of it, and it requires a conversation with somebody. If you've critically assessed the thing, no matter what it is, and you've come to a conclusion, a belief about it, because you've critically assessed it in the first place, and it's not like it doesn't form part of your identity, you haven't been like brainwashed into it, it's not part of an ideology, then it's relatively easy to change your mind. However, if it's something that you've been indoctrinated into, then just being battered around the head with the facts doesn't help. My experience of this is that people tend to regress into that. And the other thing with a lot of the online like YouTubers around flat Earth, it doesn't matter what you say to them, because they don't actually, you're not convincing them out of a belief position. They have a performative belief because it generates them either fame, revenue, narcissistic interest, or a combination of all three on the internet.
So or it's just their friends. It could just be as easy as this is their friends,
yeah.
right?
They're afraid to lose a friendship group if they change their mind.
Yep. Yeah. Ask Jaron about that, right? He kind of lost all his friends all at once.
Yeah, which brings me into my third person, which I don't agree with on quite a lot with regards to the philosophy, but it's Matt Dillahunty. Matt Dillahunty's position on there needs to be a community where people who have lost their faith and get excised from their community, there needs to be a place for them to land, because there's a huge number of them within the Christian religions, specifically within the United States, where they have lost their faith. They don't believe, but they're terrified to profess it because they know that they'll lose their community, they'll lose their friends. So Dillahunty's project was essentially to create a landing pad for these people to land on. So
that's interesting, because we don't need to talk personally about Matt Dillahunty too much, and I know you didn't mean to do that, but
no, it was more just allowing people to profess a belief that, but there may be loads of people that don't actually believe what they say they believe, but they don't feel they can say it. So you actually don't need to convince them. You just need to provide the circumstances
safe
that allow
place for them to say
it.
Yeah. They'll have friends, they'll have people that accept them. Because when I've only watched the types of programs I've seen him on and do, don't feel that way.
No, he's become quite combative. Who he is now is not that. His idea is what I'm advocating for here, not who he is now as a person.
Not how he does. Yeah, because I mean, like I said, I don't know him personally. As far as I know, he's the nicest guy in the whole world. I have no idea. But yeah, just the style of things I've seen him do doesn't seem that way. So it's interesting that at some point he did that. It's probably hard for people in the online space to know, how do I have an audience versus how do I, what's my goal? Is my goal to have an interesting show, or is my goal to change people's minds? Because those are not that, those two things might not line up, right? And the great thing about Yerba Mate is, I don't have to. This isn't a big money making thing for me. I don't care, right? I'm just doing it for fun. So
it's kind of the same for me. I'm essentially uncancelable, because I don't rely on an employer for my income. I'm already married. I already have kids. I basically own my own home. I have a very low risk. I can basically say what I like. So it, like, what I say is what I believe. I don't. There's very little opportunity. There's very little reason for me to have an ulterior motivation just to lie about something, or to conceal a belief. But I am of the opinion that people have in their brains, there's sort of like these shells of belief. There's sort of like so for example, like your outer layer is the layer that you're happy to present to the world at large. It's the thing that you present to people. And as people gain more and more and more trust, you get to like inner layers of how they feel and what they think, and you get to find out more about they're probably more likely, the better you know them, to reveal an opinion they have that they may feel is contentious or might be a bit controversial. But I think all of us have this little steel door right at the center of our consciousness, where there are thoughts that we have that you don't control them. You don't control these little thoughts that pop up in your head. They sort of just happen to you, sort of like where they transition from the subconscious to the conscious. But that little steel door where you would never in a million years share them with anybody because you're so terrified of what they would think of you. Just even having the thought, even if you didn't agree with it. Yeah, it's sort of like the notion of the way I tend to think about it is there are some comedy clubs where absolutely horrendous dark humor is totally acceptable. Mm-hmm. And there are other comedy clubs that are a bit more mainstream where the dark humor would get you pelted with bricks. And it's that kind of thing, but with friendship circles as opposed to a comedy circuit.
That's right. It could be friendship circles. And what's interesting about religion too, religion has thought crime, so like if you think the wrong thing, God will be mad at you, right? So that is a really unfortunately a powerful way to get people to not change their mind, because they won't even let themselves think about it, because there's thought crime, and they'll that's bad. Question for Max: can you ask John, is that a coffee machine or a beer tap behind him?
So that's a beer tap and that's a coffee machine.
Okay, so we got one.
Let me which one am I turning the camera? So coffee machine, beer tap.
You got it all right there. So, well, John, so good to have you on. I'm sure you'll, if I can consistently do this on Thursdays, we'll probably talk again. I'm going to talk to Max for just a couple minutes to bounce us out, and then I got to go back to work. I got a training in 19 minutes, and I got to do some prep work. So I've got to be jumping off here. So good to see you.
Have a great show. See you later.
Max, are you there, my friend? You're in the stage. Are you? Can you jump on? Can you show the world your smiling face? There it is.
Yes. Hello.
How's it going? How's Kat today?
Here we are. I have no idea where he is.
However he's doing, he's hiding, huh?
Yeah. So apparently he's okay.
Well, Max, you've been doing after shows for the debates and whatnot. Thinking about this, what are your thoughts on this? I know in some ways on the atheist question, you've kind of been an atheist your whole life. You have changed your mind at least a little bit on what you think of Christians and Muslims to a degree since I've known you. But what do you think about this topic?
I've softened a lot, and I think that the ability to change one's mind denotes intelligence. I think that dumb people do not change their mind. And smart people, when presented with reasons, do change their mind. I also agree a little bit with what you said about a lot of people don't have rational arguments, but emotional ones. But I think that is kind of the average person. When you get to more intellectually inclined people, for example, whenever I talk about why I don't steal, there's it's not because my mom told me it's wrong. It's like I had to develop a whole argument as to why, without the punishment of God for having stolen in the afterlife or any kind of a thing, with the actual possibility of getting away with it, why would you justify to yourself not to steal? And I had to build like a whole argument, and it ends up in, if you steal from someone else, you're literally just taking time out of their life for your life, right? And I think that can only be done when you can only take time from someone's life when they volunteer it to you, when it's given to you, when your couple chooses to spend the whole afternoon with you watching Netflix and cuddling and that kind of stuff, right? I think that taking someone's life literally is super immoral. But it forces you to, kind of actually develop Because I could say, oh yeah, my mommy told me stealing is wrong, right?
Yep.
And I could just leave it at that. But that was never enough for me. Even as a little kid, around 11, 12, that I started realizing that the barrier of your parents being this super powerful thing, I started noticing, oh, my parents are like average people. And when my mom says, because I say so, that's all she has. And that was never enough for me. Because I say so was never enough reason for me. Authority was never enough reason for me. Right? But I think that's kind of people, different people go about some of these things different ways. I do think that there is a correlation with the level of intelligence and the level of rationality that you apply to some of these things.
Well, Max, I'm gonna disagree with you, and then I gotta bounce. I'm getting notifications like crazy. I gotta get ready for that training I gotta do.
Okay.
But I'll leave you with this.
Sure.
I think the smarter you are doesn't make you be able to change your mind better necessarily, but it can make you be really good at defending your position. So you suddenly get really, really good at defending your position because you're really smart, even if your position is wrong. So a really smart person that's anti-climate change, they just get really, really good at defending it with what maybe small amount of facts they have. So I still would argue that intelligence doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to more likely change your mind to come to the right conclusion. I do think facts matter some. I think they do matter some, but I also think some of that smarts and intelligence can just allow you to dig in deeper. Could be wrong. We'll be discussing it more here on Thursdays, but I really do need to jump, or I'm going to get myself in trouble if I'm not prepped for that.
Right.
I don't know if you're going to stay on a few more minutes or not, but I've got
no. This is your show.
All right. Well, great to have everybody here, and if you want to come on next Thursday, I'll plan doing the same time. If you want to argue about something, that'd be great. If you want to argue about some politics, maybe I need to talk more about politics so people would know what to argue with me about, because I don't tend to do that too much. But we'll see you guys next Thursday. See you, Max.
Take care, everyone. Bye.